Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, so after talking about Carlos Correa to the New York Mets, the big rumor that involves the Chicago White Sox is that the Mets are pursuing White Sox closer Liam Hendriks about a possible trade. And what's odd about this, Jim, is that, again, as I mentioned the free agents that the Mets have already signed. They signed David Robertson. They signed Adam Ottavino. Like, you would think they have enough setup guys because they gave Edwin Diaz, their closer, the biggest contract ever for a closer, more than $100 million over 5 years to a closer. And yet here they are, and they're rumored to be talking to the White Sox about Liam Hendriks. We don't know where talks are. We don't know how serious talks are. Maybe the Mets are just kicking the tires and wondering what it would cost to acquire Liam Hendriks. Or maybe talks have progressed far enough that there's actually players being exchanged. We don't know that type of information. But let's just talk about the idea in general. Do you see this as a possible fit where the Mets have enough to make it interesting for the White Sox to trade Liam Hendriks?
It doesn't seem like a perfect fit now. I think, perhaps if the White Sox hadn't acquired Andrew Benintendi and there was maybe some uncertainty over like how hard they were competing this year or whether they're going to be doing like a secret retooling just to try to, bridge the gap between contending this year, but also like not being left holding the bag, say if Grandal's gone and Giolito's gone and just all of a sudden they have like all this production and or playing time to replace. I think Giolito production, Grandal playing time, and just a roster spot. But Lance Lynn, depending on what he looks like, he could be on or off the roster. So you could see a case where like maybe they get like a Brett Beatty, who's pretty well regarded third base prospect. Hasn't yet had major league success, but he's 20 or he'll be 23 next season. Looks pretty good. Like that could be like I could see like a Hendriks for Brett Beatty and somebody else, to try to make up the difference. But I think like now, if Hendriks is dealt, with the fact that, they are contending with Benintendi in the fold, that it looks like they need somebody who produces now. Like they can't let the idea of production this year is paramount. So, I think Jeff McNeil, who has 2 years of team control left and is not, no longer necessary because the Mets have a lot of excess infielders, Luis Guillorme, Eduardo Escobar among them, that, perhaps they could let McNeil go for somebody who gives them a super bullpen because now they have Correa, they have Lindor, they have some positional flexibility in the infield to maybe accommodate Beatty should he like take the next step. Maybe Correa can play second, and move over there. Like they have some moves to make, but I think, McNeil is probably, given that he had like a 6-win season at second base and is not making all that much, like that would seem like an overpay. So it doesn't seem particularly smart to them, especially since they had Diaz. If they didn't have Edwin Diaz, maybe I could see a case where they'd be desperate for somebody like Hendriks. But I think now it strikes me as like, well, we have excess infielders. The White Sox need a second baseman. Let's ask high and, maybe scare some National League team that might want to add Hendriks and see if we can stir something up here without giving away anybody we care about. But initially, I don't see a great fit for, not only talent, because I think Beatty is close when it comes to Hendriks, just for like big picture talent, but for what the White Sox need. Like if they're trading Hendriks, they need to do it to build a lineup that, gives the White Sox pitching staff lead after lead after lead. Like if they end up with a lineup that's similar, because they still have to make sure that Jose Abreu is replaced production wise, that if they're still trying to business a win like games 4-3, then losing Hendriks for somebody like Beatty doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless like they have supreme confidence that Beatty will click. So that's why I don't see it seems like the White Sox would be better off like shopping an offer around, because I think teams like the Dodgers, the Phillies maybe have some players who can beat it.
The Atlanta Braves,
another
team that could be interested. Maybe the New York Yankees. I know they really like Clay Holmes in the back of their bullpen, but there's some injury concerns with Holmes. And you're talking about The Mariners, oh, that's another good example. Maybe even the Toronto Blue Jays as well. Like, there are teams that are going to be interested in Liam Hendriks. Like, it doesn't surprise me the White Sox are receiving phone calls. We've been having this conversation since late October, since my offseason plan project, and pounding the table like this is something the White Sox should do. But I kind of backed away from that after the White Sox spent the amount of years and money on Andrew Benintendi, thinking I don't think it's likely that they're going to be trading Liam Hendriks. Like, you've spent this much money, just keep spending money. You're not to the luxury tax threshold yet. You could make another $10-12 million contract, go sign another outfielder, or throw that money at Gene Segura to play second base for you if you're looking for that immediate need. But that is where the fundamental misunderstanding is, especially when it comes from the New York perspective and what's being written for those that cover the Mets about the Mets going after Liam Hendriks, or at least making phone calls about Liam Hendriks. The New York perspective is the White Sox are trying to shed payroll. No, the White Sox are trying to use the amount of money that Liam Hendriks is owed for 2023 and even the 2024 season and leverage that into someone that can take care of either second base and or outfield. Like, that's what they're trying to do. It's the using Peter to pay Paul type of method of trade. And the Mets do have that player. You mentioned it, Jeff McNeil. That's perfect. I'm sure if the Mets called Rick Hahn and said, hey, we're willing to move Jeff McNeil for Liam Hendriks, a trade would be done. Jeff McNeil would be the second baseman for the White Sox, and Liam Hendriks is now pitching the 8th inning before Edwin Diaz comes out to the trumpets. And that's a pretty scary thought for a lot of teams in the National League. And it would make both teams better. And money-wise, the Mets would be taking on more salary than the White Sox. We'll see where the arbitration lies for the 2024 season with Jeff McNeil. But the White Sox would fix second base. But for a Mets perspective, they love Jeff McNeil, and it doesn't make sense to trade a 4+ WAR type of second baseman for a closer. I totally get that perspective. So you go down the list, and then I've seen a lot of trade offers where this is the perfect trade offer. James McCann and Eduardo Escobar for Liam Hendriks. No. No. I mean, I don't even know where to begin with just how bad of a trade idea that is. One, way too much money. You didn't listen. The White Sox have budget. They're really tight on budget right now. Why would we be adding that type of cash? McCann's not good anymore.
Oh, yeah, you would trade like McCann with McNeil in order to like save money. Like, that's the case. Like, just you get McNeil if you take McCann's salary. Like, that's how it works. Like, he's negative on the ledger.
Yes. Escobar, the writing's on the wall. If you're going to keep McNeil, he's a bench guy. He's getting paid twice as much as Lurie Garcia to play kind of the same role. And maybe the Mets can afford that. Maybe their super utility player gets paid $10 million and you're good with that.
You mean Escobar?
Escobar. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
So that's a terrible trade idea. And Beatty, I like Beatty, but I wonder if that's just like too much value to make a one-on-one trade with the White Sox for Hendriks. Like, from a perspective that the Mets would be overpaying for Liam Hendriks, where they could just keep Beatty in AAA, and in case Correa's back barks up, they could quickly call him up, maybe give him DH at bats throughout the season, have him play left field more. He played a few games in left field in AAA. Start developing him as an outfielder in case there's an outfield injury. So I could see from a Mets perspective that no on Brett Beatty, no on Jeff McNeil. From a White Sox perspective, no on any type of combination of James McCann and Eduardo Escobar combined in a trade. I just don't think it really works out between the Mets and the White Sox. And from a Mets perspective, it could be unfortunate and a weird feeling of being told no after you spent all this type of cash this offseason. But that's another perspective that I have is if you want to continue to make your bullpen better, there's still relievers out there. Keep spending cash.